Welcome everybody to Dead Talk Live, and tonight we have a very special guest that I'm really excited about. Help me welcome Tate Ellington. Tate, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, doing great.
Oh man, so let's just get right on it. And the messages we exchanged before tonight, you told me you are a big horror fan. How far back do you remember? Like, when was it that you became a horror fan?
God, I think it's been since I was in, I want to say the fourth grade. So however old that is, was it like 13, I guess, 12, 13? I think the first horror film I ever watched, more like Ghost, would be The Haunting, the original black and white. Still probably my favorite of all time. Uh, and then I remember a double feature I had for like a birthday party in the fifth grade that was we watched Aliens. That was my first time seeing that one, and my first Friday the 13th was Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh wow, wow. Would you say horror played any kind of influence in you going into acting?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I it's one of those where like I always loved it. I like being scared. I love the intensity of horror films. I love getting to do them. So anytime I can, I always jump at the chance. But yeah, I would say initially I started as a artist, so that was a thing I did in school, like high school, all that. But I usually like to paint, sort of draw dark subject matter, and so I think that absolutely used to rent horror movies like probably every weekend, one or two, and just went through eventually the local video store when we actually still had them.
Yeah.
Was showing my age there, but yeah, man, 100%. Like it's my favorite genre, I think.
Now, going back, besides horror, I mean, you said you were an artist and stuff, and I see all the paintings you have in
Yes,
the
sorry.
background. Uh,
Shame, self promotion.
no, that's awesome. When did you, really get serious and go head first into acting, like getting an agent, start auditioning and whatnot?
Pretty much. The I ended up going to school for it. I did a play, like one of the few sort of theaters we had in my hometown. Did a play there when I was in high school. Loved it. Decided that's what I wanted to do. Went to college for it. But basically, I worked right out of college for 1 year in a place in Columbus and also in Kentucky, Columbus, Ohio, and Newport, Kentucky. Then got in a car, had a good friend. We drove to New York, got an apartment, and then just started hitting the pavement. So fortunately, was able to survive. Had some loving parents who not everybody gets that gift. So many times of like, I'm broke. Can you guys help out? But yeah, like really just started hitting the pavement. Back then, we still had like backstage and stuff, so you go get the actual like trade paper, look up
Yeah.
auditions, head there, go to them.
Now, I
Uh,
assume since you went to New York, you were looking into theater before
yeah,
any kind of film.
yeah. I'd gone to school for theater, loved theater. But I grew up watching movies, so I always wanted to do film. But my college really didn't have any focus on that. But I love the stage. It's been a long time since I've been on it. But especially right now. Not a whole lot. I'm finally getting back to theater, but yeah. But yeah, it's that's why I went to New York because I absolutely love being on stage, love the theater, and so had gone for that and knew that we still had plenty of TV and film in New York.
Oh
But
yeah.
I knew that LA didn't really have. It's got a decent theater base. It has a wonderful theater community, but if you really want to do theater, New York's kind of the place to be. So yeah.
Now, when you were hitting the pavement in New York, did you manage to get any roles in any off Broadway or even Broadway productions?
I got a lot of roles in some very off. Way off Broadway. I did actually. I got to do finally one Broadway show right before I left. I did a show called The Philanthropist at the Roundabout Theater
Yeah, I
on
know that.
Broadway. Yeah, and I got to work with Matthew Broderick and Jonathan Cake,
Wow.
Stephen Weber, who I was a huge fan of, and who Matthew and Stephen were just absolutely wonderful human beings. So had an amazing time. Like loved getting on the subway and heading to the theater. Man, it was amazing.
Well, so much, regard is given to Broadway and all the theaters in Broadway. My area that I would love to hang out would be Greenwich Village, and there's so
Oh,
many amazing theater productions that are way, way off Broadway down there in the village that happen there. I mean, what do you think about that?
oh no, I love it down there. I mean, anytime I still have so many friends that live in New York who still do theater in New York, and that's I mean that's sort of the grit of it all, and it's that's one of the things I miss the most. I love LA, but I miss sort of the grittiness of New York and that part of town. Any of the theater productions there, I got to do a few that were like things for the Fringe Festival, stuff like that, and some of those were always the best because you really got to dive into stuff and really got to experiment and just had a good time and weren't necessarily having to make sure that the box office was bringing in money, so so you were okay to play. Because yeah, people like to make money, so usually they want to tend to have a good show to do so.
Exactly. Now, there has rarely been an actor that I've spoken to who has not gotten their start on stage.
Yeah.
Almost all of them have.
It's-
Do you think if you were giving advice to someone, would you advise them to get their start in theater? Let's say they want to go into film, okay? They're okay with theater, but they want to get into motion pictures,
yeah.
whether it be television or film. Would you recommend to them, listen, get on stage, get comfortable being in front of an audience?
Absolutely. I think one thing about being on stage, especially, is that it's in the moment, it's live, you can't hide.
Yeah,
So basically, I mean, if you go up on a line, you got to find a way to get yourself out of it. If you're dependent on your other actors on stage to help you out, it's a living, breathing thing when you're on stage. And I think that only helps with film and TV because there's a comfort level you get when being on stage of being that open, that presented to the world. That then on a set, you've got sometimes 100 people sitting there staring at you. Sometimes while you're half naked or you're in a harness up in the sky, or just everything you can imagine. And so I think that comfort of being in front of that many people that you get from being on stage absolutely helps with film and TV.
that
Uh,
that
yeah,
that
just
that makes
yeah.
absolute sense. So explain for you, how did
Yeah.
that transition happen from being in New York, being in the off Broadway plays, transition into TV and film?
It sort of all happened at the same time because basically I would just as much as I was pursuing anything on stage at the same time would be going out for student films, short films, anything I could find, especially anything that could pay money. But sometimes those are hard to get to.
Yeah.
Um, and so sort of did that, and that's where I learned about film and TV. It was basically again sort of like on the job training. Anytime I'd be on any sort of set, no matter what level of film it was, I would always be looking around, seeing how everybody did everything. I started, which I recommend to some people if you doing background artist work. I did that in New York early on when I was there. That's where I learned how a set worked. I
Yeah.
would just sit, look around, and listen to everything everybody was saying, and any sort of things they were, any of this sort of lingo or anything like that. And then basically like sort of just kept doing that and got really fortunate. My first like big break was through a play I did for the Fringe Festival. Ended up doing that. I had a woman who's now kind of one of my guardian angels for work. His name's Meg Simon. We'd finished the show. I walked out, was talking to some friends, and then she just came up to me and was like, "Hi, I'm Meg. I've got I think there's something you'd be right for. I'd like for you to come in to see me." Handed me a card, and like I was kind of like, "Oh, thank you so much. See you later." And then the friends I was with were like, "Do you have any idea who that was?" I was like, "Not a clue. Who was it?" And they were like, "No, that's the head of casting at Warner Brothers for New York."
Wow.
And so there's like, "Oh God," and so then called and had my first TV audition with her, and she was one of those people who was so kind and so loving to actors. She sat down with me because I didn't know what I was doing and really like coached me through the auditions. Like, here's how you get the job. I was like, okay. And got like my first TV test through that, and sort of then got my agent, my lawyer, my manager, all that. So yeah, it was one of those.
Everything fell into place.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Now, there are several projects. You have a lot of stuff on your resume. Great stuff.
Thanks.
Where I got to know you, as I told you in the pre call, was in Quantico. Okay,
Yeah.
the TV show Quantico, that show premiered and it became an instant big hit.
Oh yeah.
Back in the days when seasons would be 26 episodes, it seems like those
Yeah.
days just
Those
disappeared.
days ago.
So
You
you,
might 15, like
yeah, now it's everything, you'll be lucky if you get a 13 episode season out of something. I'm not saying it's either bad or good, it's just things have changed. Now,
yeah,
Simon Asher, that's the role.
yeah.
One of the biggest roles in the first season of Quantico. A very, I would say by far, the most complicated character in the first season of Quantico. Very mysterious character, and in the end, you are the hero. You are the hero of the season. So, walk us through how the role came your way, when you got to read what this character was going to be about. What were your feelings? Tell us about the Quantico experience.
Absolutely. Like, basically, it's almost sort of a running joke for me in work because I would constantly test. So it'd be in testing. If anybody doesn't know it, there's like you do your audition, you go see producers. Then normally for a TV show like Quantico or something like that, you then go to a studio test where it'll be all the people in the studio, sometimes like 20 people in the room, depending, all staring at you. You do your audition, you leave. If they like you, then they go, all right, we want to see you for network. So then maybe a day later, 2 days later, then you will go to the network test, which is even more people, even more awkward. And you're just there, and it's usually you and one other person against each other, and sometimes three. And then you find out quite literally, like, oh, you didn't get it, but you've already signed a contract with all the money you might make and all the stuff you'll get, and then find out you didn't get it, so you go home. But I had so many times of getting on planes where I'd be flown out and do that and all those things. For Quantico, I lucked out because I'd shot a pilot the year before, went in for this one. Casting director, who is wonderful, Robert Ulrich. I hadn't seen him in a long time, so he asked me to come in. I was like, yeah, of course, went in. And then fortunately, they were like, we really like you for the role of Simon. We don't have anybody to test against you yet, but we want to see you for the test. We'll let you know when we have somebody you can test against. Great. Luckily, I got another test offer. And essentially, when you go for those tests, you sign the contract. So if they hire you, you're unavailable from that point on.
Yeah.
You're doing it. And so I was on my way to the other tests. Like my people had called, ABC and Quantico on them and said, like, you might lose him. So if you want to test him, you got to test him right now, or either, figure out what you want to do. So I got the call on the way to the other test. They just said, you're booked. You got the job. Wow. I didn't have to test. It's the first time that's ever happened. I don't think it'll ever happen again for me. It was amazing. Pulled over the side of the road. And so then went to shoot the pilot. We shot the pilot in Atlanta. And it was one of the best times I've had. The pilot was absolutely wonderful. Had such a good time doing it. Love that whole cast. Still friends with all of them. They're still amazing, amazing people that I will always be friends with. Mm-hmm. And we basically, like, from the jump, I absolutely loved Simon. It was I put about as much as I could of me into him, and then also for the whole time shooting, we never really knew where a character was going to go.
Okay.
We could kind of ask Josh Safran, who was the showrunner, writer. He'd give us hints. He'd kind of be like, I can tell you this, but I can't tell you if you're the bad guy or not, So we're like, okay. So basically, every scene we shot, I would do one take where I was a good guy and one take where I was a bad guy. And like I did in my own head to some degree, but would always kind of do a take with the idea that if I'm told, oh no, you're actually the villain, you're the main, you're the terrorist, you're the guy who set off the explosions, that I would always know I had done takes that they could use for that. And so,
that
it was an amazing.
So technique. Weird. It's like you were shooting a duality. You were shooting,
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you never knew where you sort of stood, and so we'd find out essentially like each week when we get a script, okay, here's where you're going. And I came to find out, had we not gotten our sort of back end order, that they were potentially going to make me the bad guy, where it was kind of like we're leading where we can go there, but we really love your character, we love this, we love where it's going. We got our extended order. Okay, we want you to go this direction. But there was a world where I would have been the
terrorist.
Yes, exactly. And so getting to do that, we shot the entire show. After the pilot, we went to Montreal, shot the whole show there. Very cold, like really cold. But loved Montreal. It's a wonderful city. Would love to go back. And one of those things where I had never been a full series regular for something that shot that long, and it was an amazing experience to learn how to do that, and also taking ownership of your own character, and that like Simon became mine. That's sort of like, no, I also have input on this character, and he's part of me, and so I was trying to think too, like the finding out that I found out I was going to blow up the week before I was going to blow up. Like, I had an itching suspicion. I was like, this character's great. I feel like it's going to make a big dramatic thing if he dies. I got a feeling they're going to kill me. Told my wife that. She was like, damn it, you're probably right. I was like, yeah. We went to the movies one day. I forgot what we gone to see. I want to say maybe it was like, was it Superman Dawn of Justice? Anyway, I turned on my phone. When we, movie's over, I turned on my phone. And I had like a text from my manager. Then I had a phone call from my manager saying, call me. Then another thing saying, call me. And I looked at my wife. I was like,
that's it.
I just died. She was like, what? I was like, I'm pretty sure I just died. So I just called Bob, and that's my manager, Bob Glemon. And I was, it's like, I died, didn't I? He was like, yeah. They killed you. I was like, all right, well, how do I go out? It's like, I think you blow up. I was like, great. Like, let's see what happens.
But Simon's arc, okay, looking back on the character of Simon, and I'm talking about the version that made it to television. He had such an amazing arc from the beginning, the suspicion, everyone thinking it's you, to in the end taking that nuclear device and driving off the bridge, I believe, sacrificing yourself to save everybody else. How do you feel about, because I mean, think, if you were the bad guy, you were not going to make it to season 2.
No.
So did you prefer to end up being the hero, the one that sacrifices himself to save all your friends?
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, it's one of those things because sometimes it's so hard in this job, and especially that type of show where it's, because sometimes limited shows now, they have 10 episodes, you know where it's going, you know where it ends. With something like this, you never knew. For me, now, obviously, I like having a job, so I would have been totally fine to make it. But it was one of those things, too, where even with that, even if you survive some seasons, that doesn't mean you're always coming back. Yeah. Sometimes you can off the show, sometimes the characters don't work. So for me as an actor, it was really wonderful to get to have a conclusion to that character. Like, because I loved that character. Mm-hmm. It was one that still means a lot to me. It's something I really poured everything I had into. And so getting to have, kind of a hero's end, like not everybody gets that in TV. Like, you don't sometimes get to have that complete arc to your character like you do in a film or something like that. So I really loved it. I loved doing those scenes. It was getting to do like the phone call to Raina for like Yasmin's character, who's also love her to death, and so it was amazing. I was doing all my scenes with her. And also the same with like Priyanka's character, because I loved the way that character became in many ways her sidekick, or sort of her also rock that she could go to and somebody she could depend on. I loved that relationship developed between them. And that wasn't always there. That was something they just found through the writing and were like, oh yeah, this works. But yeah, I love I got to do the stunt of like pulling out, like I got to like floor it when I'm supposed to be driving away with the bomb. They're like, you want to do it? I was like, absolutely. So, got to like peel out, floor it going down this road. And then I was driving on the bridge. You're really only going like 30 miles per hour, maybe. You're not going that fast, but I scared the hell out of the crew. Like with more and more takes, we're getting closer, and then like the director was kind of like, David he's like, can you kind of jerk the car a little bit? We don't want to put anybody at risk, but can you? Because we want to see it, and it's nicer if we can see it with you. And I was like, yeah, of course, I got it. on one of those takes, I pulled a little hard and got kind of close to,
To
to
the edge.
like, yeah. It was an empty bridge, nobody was on it, but they all definitely let out a sigh of relief. They were like, okay, that's it. That one scared us. Like, we're good. Um,
So
but yeah,
Quantico was, like I said, a huge success in the first season. After the season was over, it aired. What did it change for you in your career?
oh, it opened up so many doors for me. It was one of those because like I said, I'd had work, I'd been around, I'd always, been very close to things, and so this was one of those that finally was very much like, no, you can maintain a character in a series, you can maintain a character for 21 episodes, and as an actor, that's a big thing, and as people hiring you, that's a big thing. They want to see that you can handle something. They want to see they can depend on you to show up. They want to make sure that with every job, like you're always wanting to make sure you're putting your best forward because you never know who's watching, and that's how you get work. There's so many times I've had work through, oh, so and so saw me in this and I didn't realize they had seen that, and then they got a call for that, and so I think it gave me a confidence I didn't have before with acting, I think, in a lot of ways. And then it also let me know I was able to do that. And then also there's something about being a series regular. I think, like I said before, like you get to have ownership of the character like you don't sometimes in other things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more of a collaboration with your directors and your writers. And that I realized at one point on set, I had a director who I really loved, but he had given me a kind of note that made no sense based on the last episode. And normally I don't ever rock the boat. I try my best to just kind of, all right, yeah, whatever you need, let me work it out. But I knew it didn't make any sense because I was like, in the last episode, like we were screaming at each other. Why would I be doing that now? And then I kind of realized he hadn't seen that episode. It's like, he's here doing his job and he's doing an amazing job, but he actually hasn't seen all these episodes, so he doesn't know that. And so I had to I ended up writing our showrunner because they were actually in New York and we were in Montreal. And I was like, hey, Josh, I don't want to step on any toes, but this doesn't make any sense. He was like, oh, yeah, no, don't do that. He was like, do what you think. We know you. We trust you. They just didn't know what was going on. I was like, all right, great. But that's a really huge thing, I think, for an actor, especially on the TV show, to feel that ownership of a character that they're also putting themselves into.
And also, the longer you're in it, I've heard this plenty of times as well, the writers start writing the character around you.
Absolutely. It becomes, and that happened a lot for this, where it was basically like, at one point, we were given some room with network stuff. It is a lot of times where those scripts go through like 20 different people, 30 different. I mean, like it is approved down to everything. The line is approved. And so there isn't a lot of room to play. On some shows there is. They want you to play a lot. But on certain things, they're like, nope, that's the script. Don't deviate.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, like maybe like midway through our season, I was given some liberty where they were basically just like, no, anything you ever come up with works great. Always try it. I was like, okay, great. So it really was a thing where they started to allow me to have much more input on what Simon did or said, or a change of a line here, or this is I think this was the way he would do that or approach this. And so I think that's a really big thing. And like normally I'm trying to think what the saying is. It's like the first season, who's it for? It's like the second or third season is where the actors get all the power, where they are like, no, I'm established, I'm this character. It's one of those. So I think.
Well, it showed a lot of trust, and we're not talking about like a small night. This was on ABC, and it showed that they had a lot of trust in you to give you that freedom in the first season of a show. So
absolutely,
that's awesome.
And they were and the same, like I'll always have to say too, like one of the best things was Priyanka Chopra, who's she's a megastar. Mm-hmm. She's like, I didn't really know who she was initially, and I see like, 15 million followers on Instagram. I'm like, okay, she's one of the biggest stars, in India. Okay, great, awesome.
A lot of people don't know that she made the transition from India and Bollywood over into American television.
Yeah, and that was one of the big things for her. It was basically like she was kind of handed with ABC. They were like, we want to work with you. Here's our scripts. Which one would you like to do? And she chose Quantico. And I've never seen anybody work as hard. Like she's one of those people who absolutely busted her ass. There was one time she had to go finish filming a movie she had been working on in Bollywood in India, where then she had the weekend. She left shooting Quantico, I'm going to say on Thursday or Friday, flew to India,
Wow.
got on a helicopter, I think, that flew her to the location, shot her scenes, got back on an airplane, flew back, arrived like Monday to shoot again, like, full day. So, I mean, it was one of those where she's a workhorse. So it was amazing to watch that. So,
That's dedication. So
yeah.
let's move on from Quantico.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
one night I'm sitting on the couch, trying to find something to watch. I come across this movie called The Endless. I'm like, all right, sounds good. I started watching it. I love the film, and you're of course in it. And as the movie goes on, I start recognizing that it's like sort of a carryover from another movie that I saw several years prior called Resolution. Now, there is The Endless was great. You were great in The Endless. And, but the filmmakers, I don't know if it's the filmmakers, the studio, or what, insist that The Endless is not a sequel to Resolution. But it's obviously in the same universe.
Yes.
First of all, when you booked the job for The Endless, had you seen or known anything about Resolution?
I had not seen Resolution. I'm trying to think if I had watched Spring. I think I once I knew I was going in for these guys, I wanted to know some about them. So I think I watched Spring, which is an amazing film. It's beautifully done, and Lou Taylor Pucci does an amazing job. And I don't believe I'd watched Resolution. Once I knew I was doing it, I think then I watched Resolution. I 100% they're in the same universe. Like,
Oh yeah,
it's not necessarily a sequel, or like it's still. I mean, if you've seen The Endless, it's like all these sort of like parallel bubbles within each time and time frames, and so it's definitely within that world of like not being able to break out of your sort of circle, out of your cycle. But yeah, these guys, I went in for them. It was pretty great because I'm still friends with them. David Lawson, still, we went axe throwing like a couple weeks back. So still see him all through the pandemic. He was doing a thing called, which was amazing, called Porch Beers, where it would be all these great like filmmakers and writers and horror directors and everything. Like, we just get together over Zoom, having a beer and just chat about work. And so it was always amazing just to sit in on that and listen. But yeah, like I went in, I auditioned. I really wanted it because I loved the character, but I was very afraid I was too young. I was sort of like, I feel like they want somebody who looks older than me. Could be my age, but I feel like I always sometimes play too young.
Mm-hmm.
And went in, I thought I nailed it. I did a great job. And then basically like found out, oh, you did. Like you walked in, we're like, well, we found our guy. And they're like, the only issue is your age. We're afraid you're too young. They were like, but we really want you. Can we like dye your hair or something? So I was like, sure, whatever you need to do. So that was one of my favorite times, I think, filming. And I just got to do something like it recently. But we were just at a kids camp just outside of San Diego for 2 weeks. Shot the whole thing there. They did have some other location shoots where they went to the place they used for Resolution. Yeah. But one of those where you're just there, few lights, great camera. Like Justin is an amazing writer. He was focusing more on his acting. On this one, Aaron was doing a little bit more of the directing on this and focusing on that. And Aaron's an amazing DP. He's an amazing director. Same for Justin. And so it was really wonderful getting to watch those guys work.
Now, did they do any? Did they explain to you at all that this movie is in the same universe as another movie called Resolute? How did they explain it to you?
They basically, we went through and they were sort of like, this is because part of The Endless is it's a tie-in in a way with it, in that it is this being stuck in loops, and it depends on how large your loop is. Our loop for my group was probably about like 100 years. Yeah. Like, so we would cycle back through and come in. You see in the film where there's one loop for some poor bastard who was like 7 seconds, You're like, that's just a never-ending hell.
Yeah.
And so for them, they explain like, this is all still part of our our sort of shared universe that they have created on their own. And if you watch Synchronic, which I highly suggest, a wonderful
Oh
movie
yeah,
that
I
they.
just saw it last week.
Okay, great. If you notice, anybody who's really paying attention will notice the drug they're using is kind of from our film, is the
Ah,
red leaf. So it's a little bit of a tie in there that like the drug we've been making and using the what's kind of called the red leaf is also kind of what they're using to manufacture the drug that's in that.
which is a
So
time travel drug.
yeah, yeah. So it's just a little bit of like them sort of doing a nod and a wink, but also tying in these worlds. I think they all do encompass the same world in a way, at least for me, I believe.
Oh
And
yeah,
I would
yeah.
say too. So yeah.
Now, do you? It's never really, what I love about those, like the Endless and Resolution. It's not the whole plot is not handed to you on a silver platter. It's left up to a lot of viewer interpretation. Is this just that area? Is it like I don't know, like a black hole on Earth where time loops itself? Is it extraterrestrial? When you were doing the role, how did you play it? Did you tell yourself, all right, this is extraterrestrial, this is interdimensional? How did
For
you,
me,
I mean, what explanation did you come up with?
for me, I sort of took it as that this was a almost like a wouldn't have said it like a time warp or a black hole or whatever you're gonna say, like a where dimensions collide, but on its own in this place. Some others might see it as the entire world. For me, I took it as it being very central to this location.
Yeah.
This was very precise. You went too far outside of the what they call the hoodoo sticks would be now you're fine. You're in your own world, but in this place, it is almost the sort of sometimes they'll say, like it's almost like soap bubbles for dimensions, and I think there are. So I do believe in like sort of parallel universe and what's right next to you, what's right next to this, rubbing up against each other. And I think there was a lot to that. That's
Yeah.
what I tried to say to myself and focus on was that I am stuck in this place, but I understand it and I know it and I'm comfortable with it. But I do think for my character too, that's his grip on reality.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if I had to go too much further, then I might lose it. Like,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of it, I think like most things, a lot has to do with control, and I think that's at least for my character had a lot to do with control, trying to control these things, trying to control the people around him without realizing it.
And what's
But that,
weird is that the people in those loops, they know pretty much that they're in a loop. At least some of them
yeah,
do. They know
yeah.
that this is repeating for them.
Yes, like our group, the one that was at the camp, 100% understood that they were going to keep repeating this, and that's kind of like even Shane. I'm trying to think of the character's name, but like he referenced doing the magic trick and also things like that. That like you do a thing like 1,000 times or whatever, is it 10,000 times but you become perfect at it. And so this group knew they had about 100 years, and so they would just keep trying to get better at something. That's what for me, for my character, was the math equation,
Okay.
like constantly trying to figure that out, and never getting the answer I wanted, but I'll just keep trying. I'll have one more loop,
Yeah.
we'll start again, and I'll try it again.
Now, would you
And,
class? Sorry, I'm sorry.
oh,
Go on.
no, you go.
I was going to ask you, would you classify The Endless as a purely science fiction film? Would you cross it sci-fi horror? How would you classify it?
For me, I felt it more as being like sci-fi horror, and not horror in your typical
Yeah.
sense, but there was definitely to me an eeriness to it. Like I think with Justin and Aaron both would agree, like it's got a very like Lovecraft sort of element
Yeah.
to it in a way, and so I was scared when reading the script. I also love anything that does deal with the cult. I felt like I lived in one sort of for a year, so got a very like, personal connection to it. But so anything with that, where you have a leader who seemingly is a wonderful person and doing everything they can, is still pushing everyone towards a place. And I think you notice with our group, there was a certain sadness among some of the
Yeah.
characters. There was I want out of this and I can't get out. And I finally come to an end where I don't want to do this anymore, But me being the leader kept pushing for it, and that's, what I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as for me, and that I think falls into a horror element
Hmm.
of, I think I think anything dealing with someone exerting a lot of control over others can always lead towards horror.
Absolutely.
Um, and so yeah, but I definitely definitely sci-fi, and definitely for me horror element definitely
Okay.
involved.
Now let's move on to a movie that there's no doubt about it is horror, and that's Sinister 2. Okay? You play Dr. Stromberg in
Yes,
Sinister 2. Uh, I assume you saw the first movie before
yes,
taking
yeah,
on
love
this
it.
project. Yeah, Ethan Hawke. It was a
Yeah,
great
love it.
film. Scary, really
Well,
scary.
still, it's probably in like my, I would say, still like top 10 somewhere. Like it's top 10, top 15. I watch it whenever I can. It terrifies the hell out of me, mostly because of the family videos,
Oh,
like especially
God.
being a family man now. It is just tears me apart. I still almost had to look away on those, but loved it. And so um, I went in for that one, so I knew what I was going in for. Got the audition, sort of almost flipped out. I was like, all right, damn it, I want this. Like, what do I got to do? Okay. And what we did was essentially that scene where I'm explaining everything that you see in the film. So I got it down. I went in. I felt like I nailed it. It was like, this is the best I can do with this, and until you give it to me, and then I'll work harder. But like, let's see what happens. Went in, thought I did great. Was always like, yeah, we'll see what happens. Um, and then I got a call. Like time went by. I'm trying to think how long it'd been, and then I got a call. They're just like, it's yours. You got it. Like
Awesome.
didn't go in and see anybody else, and that's kind of rare. And so just booked straight from the tape. And so I flipped out. I was so excited. Our director, Kieran Foy, was wonderful. Got to set. He was great. I knew some of his work, and he's gone on to do a lot, some pretty awesome stuff since then. But getting to do that character in any horror film, and I kind of maybe I don't like I always call it Professor Exposition, where it's like, "Hi, I'm the guy who's now going to explain everything to you in the horror movie.
Yeah.
Like, here's what's happening. And that's what this character was, and I love those characters. Like some people, sometimes they're not done well, but like I love it getting that story, like it because it almost becomes a campfire story where
Hmm.
you have this. I'm going to tell you a story. There's a spirit, that lives in the woods, and a long time ago this happened, and so going in for that scene, I also love James Ransone. I'd seen him in The Wire and all over the place, and he's amazing. Loved him. So we do that scene, we do all those, and I just had the best time of my life. I ate up every second of it. I had horror soundtracks playing for myself. Like I grabbed like The Exorcist, like that weird, like horrible, like almost violin, creaky
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Um, and so we went in, did it. I got to see Jason Blumhouse. Like he was there for a bit. It was like nice to see you. Love all the movies you made. And so yeah, we shot it. I think I shot for maybe 2 or 3 days. And the best part of all of it, I'd mentioned David Lawson, the Porch Beers. Robert Cargill, who wrote Sinister and wrote Sinister 2, I never met because we were never on set the same day. And so we were doing Porch Beers one night. First time I joined, he's on there because he knows David really well. They're all friends. And so he's chatting. He was like, hey, Tate, I wrote the movie you were in. I was like, oh, God, I know. Like, so good to meet you. He was like, it's good to finally meet, you. He was like, great. But yeah, I absolutely ate it up and just had a blast. It was absolutely wonderful.
It was. Now, for me, Sinister 2, the ending, when we see the tape and
Yeah.
what they do, it was absolutely horrifying. When you got to see the finished product and you got to see the tape and the ending, how did you feel about that ending?
Oh, it freaked me out. Like, I mean, it's one of those two where like I like when anything is not quite resolved. You've got the like basically, oh no, we're not really done yet. Like this is it kind of keeps going. Like any sort of evil in the world can constantly come back in different forms and keep moving. And I actually had to go back and I'm trying to think if I had to do reshoots where I'm trying to think if I was breaking it up. There's something that didn't make it into the film. I'm trying to think what it was where then I shot. Um, I ended up throwing my arm out of socket because I had to use a sledgehammer on something a lot, and like, so I had to do that. And the next thing I know, like I got home, was like, oh my god, my arm hurts so much. But I loved it. I loved like I like any sort of twist with that, and the
Yeah.
same for the first. I love that it ended up being, the daughter, and
Yeah.
I love it's the
It's
kids.
the
Like,
kids. The
yeah,
demon basically gets a hold of the kids and
yeah,
has the kids murder their parents and
yeah.
family, and they get it all on tape. Now let's move on to a film that I just saw for the first time 2 weeks ago, and that's Beelzebub. Beelzebub. How do you pronounce that?
Beelzebub. Beelzebub.
Beelzebub. Okay,
Yeah,
Beelzebub.
Beelzebub.
Now, never heard of it. Ran across it. Read the synopsis. Like, this sounds interesting. The movie's great. It's like half Spanish, half
Yeah,
English. You play an FBI agent who basically is a paranormal expert. Okay,
yes,
and you're tracking basically these. It's to sum it up, it's about the second coming of Christ in a way.
yes.
So, what were your initial thoughts when you read the script for Beelzebub?
I loved it. I mean, like I said, it's basically like anything, and I always tell my agents and my manager, really anything that's horror, please send my way. Like if there's ever anything, because I just love doing it. So, and I love the people involved in it, because like everybody who's around horror is fascinating.
Yes.
Like it's the best to work with, and they're there for it because they love it. And I love that energy on a set. They sent it. I'm trying to think. The second I knew, they were like, "Okay, so you're going to be a priest, FBI agent, who's going to perform exorcism at some point." I was like, "I'm in. What do I need to do?" Yeah, get the job. And so then went in. It was one of those two where, like, I think for one of the scenes we had to do was the kind of like doing the exorcism. I think it's what happens in the tunnels at one point where we're screaming out, going through the exorcism rite and everything else, and reading all the words. And so I'm in the audition room just like screaming at the top of my lungs, casting out, a demon, and casting directors were like, "That's great." Like I was like, we'll see, let me know. And so then like, I'd read the script before that and loved it. From the jump, it was one of those, because the first scene, for anybody who hasn't seen it, I don't want to like give it too much away, but also if you have, you know what I'm talking about in the hospital. It's one of the most vicious scenes I've read on the page. I knew that was going to be a hard one to watch.
And that's exactly what I wanted to ask my next question about. That opening sequence in the nursery in the hospital, me being a lifelong horror fan, it even made me cringe, because you're seeing this horrible stuff happening to these newborn babies. When you first read that on paper, where you're like, man, how is the audience, no matter how much they love horror, how are they going to react to this?
100%. That was probably my biggest concern. Like, because initially it was one of those where you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Where it was like, this one really bothers me. My daughter was my first. I have two. My daughter was only like 6 months old at that point, maybe 7 months. And so I had just been through that and knew what that place looked like, knew how that place was supposed to be. And so it's a place of, so much joy and all that. And reading that really kind of tore me apart. And so I really had to think, like, do you want to do this? Do you want to be in this? Because this is pretty vicious.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately decided to do it. But I will say, because I wasn't there for the taping of those scenes.
No.
And so I watched it. It was rough. Like it was a hard one to take in. And one of the things is, the rest of the film, I don't think ever pushes it that far. It pushes everything in a great way, but it never gets to that. And even talking to Emilio, our director, that was one where I was like, all right, what do you do? And he was like, it's intense, and I want that sort of the most like horrible thing I can think of. And I was like, okay,
that's it. You nailed it. Do you appreciate filmmakers who take things to another level, like that scene? And it worked out. I mean, it was hard to watch, but it really added to the movie and the intensity of it. It was a risk, and I think it paid off. Yeah. Do you respect filmmakers who try to push the boundaries like that?
Yeah, I do, if I know that they are. I'm not sure. Maybe it's like pure in their intentions for doing it, because there's plenty of films that I watch, and I have I have a pretty strong stomach for stuff, but anything that gets into, for me, being a huge horror fan, I like if it gets too much into what it would be classified to me as like torture porn,
Yeah.
sort of stuff like that. It's not my thing.
Yeah, me too.
I turned off of that a long time ago. Where like I maybe saw the first like Saw, or maybe even the second. Around the third, it started to become like I'm just watching someone be tortured, and I really don't want to see that.
Hmm.
I'd rather have some suspense. I'd rather have just more. I don't mind a great slasher. I love slashers, but so anytime a filmmaker, if I read a script and I can tell it's just for shock value, or I can see, or if I meet the director and I can tell they're just like, I just want to, push the boundary, but there's not a real intention behind it.
It doesn't add to the story.
Just add the story, and it's like, and I also know that their motives are then purely shock value, and that I don't want. I'm
Hmm.
like, you can go shock anybody. That's pretty easy,
Yeah.
and so I'd rather see you have to push against that or really commit to no, I'm doing this because I'm really trying to make a statement about this. Like, okay, then I can get behind you. There's certain roles I won't take. There's some stuff where it's more for I don't want to be in that headspace where I'm
Yeah.
just like, you know what, as an actor you have to commit, and there's some stuff where I'm like, I really don't want to have to put myself through that. And maybe that's not being as committed of an actor as I should be, but I just know personally I can't put myself through it. So
Absolutely. I totally respect that. And I feel the exact same way. Now, one of the greatest scenes in that movie is when you guys are in that abandoned church, I guess is what it is, the
yeah,
building. Yeah,
yeah,
that is, okay, I got to ask you this, okay?
yeah,
With the statue of Christ on the floor,
yeah,
and it starts talking. Now,
yeah.
it was done great, all
Thank you.
right?
Yeah, I know
But
really well.
it was done beautifully well. Did you read that and you're like, wow, this might, if it's not done right, might come across corny, which it did
Absolutely.
not. It was done perfectly, scary, totally within the of what, would freak you out.
Yeah.
But did you ever worry that if it's not done properly, it might take the movie in the wrong
Oh,
direction?
yeah. Absolutely. Like that's what's so I think scary like with any film is you're always taking a risk because you can give the greatest performance you've ever given and you feel amazing. And if somebody edits it terribly, you look awful,
Yeah.
and it's out of your control. And with that, especially with practical and visual effects, like I knew that was going to be digital. I love practical effects. I love anytime, like I love seeing them create it, make it like, all right, we're going to 3, 2, 1, go. All right. Head comes off and now we're, blood's everywhere. Awesome. Those are some of my favorite. I love it. Eat it up. With that, we had an actor and I'm blanking on his name. You can look him up, but he did all the physical and the voice, and essentially though, like anything that's being done digitally, he's essentially in like pajamas,
Yeah.
He's got on sort of like these black, pajamas, like kind of thing over his head so they can do all the digital over the top. And he was amazing. He was really going for it, giving all these contortions and voice and really getting into it. And he's actually a comedian. I think he was a comic, like stand-up comic. I forgot how he got the role, but he was wonderful and
Oh,
just
yeah.
like nailed it. But yeah, I know from watching all these films, from all the films I've seen, from seeing it happen, you get a bad effect, it looks terrible, and
Hmm.
it completely destroys the performance. I mean, if you have a really bad effect of, all right, here's this statue character Jesus, and then all of a sudden it looks awful, and you cut back to us, and we're really giving it our all, we look stupid.
Yeah.
Like, and there's no way to save it. I do know that because Emilio had said because they had some time between putting it out, and I know that was a big reason why it took a while, because they were just making sure, because he knew that too. He was like, if this looks bad, this movie crashes. Like it
Exactly.
just stopped dead right here, and it's stupid from this point on,
Hmm.
And so I think that was one of theirs where they really labored over getting that one right. I know it became a thing where like, all right, more money so we can make sure this effect is right. Like, let's get it in there.
But it was
Um,
worth it. It was worth
thank-
it. That scene was amazing. I forget what was the name of your co-actor in that scene.
Oh, it's Joaquin. Crap. because he's just in
Yeah,
Suicide Squad.
yeah. The name's on the tip of my tongue too. He was
So,
great. He was great in Belzebeth as well. And you guys had this great on-screen chemistry
oh,
together.
thanks. Like, yeah.
He was the skeptic. You were the one that
Oh, yeah.
was, the
He's also
scientist.
like he's a house. Like that
Yeah,
man is giant. Like, I always thought he could have just crushed me within his hands. And like, but he was the sweetest man. And like he's a superstar because like he
yeah,
was also we asked so many people because we shot I want to say 2 weeks in Mexicali, so right across the border. I would stay there and then sometimes drive back on the weekends to help out my wife with our fairly newborn.
yeah,
Uh, and then we shot for 5 weeks in Mexico City, which was amazing. I'd never been, and that's where Joaquin's from, and so people would be stopping him on the street or anytime we were on set and be like, "Hey, and he'd go take
he's a
photos."
big
And
star there. I mean, yeah,
he's huge, yeah. And he's been in because I knew him initially from he's one of the villains for Quantum of Solace for
yeah,
and so yeah, I was like, "Oh God, you're in a James Bond film," and I'm a huge James Bond fan. Like this is amazing. And he basically like he it was weird. I don't want to like not like I guess like call him out. I know it was so strange to see somebody who's such an amazing actor, and he was almost nervous about some of the English speaking parts where
hmm,
he would get shy about it, and I was like, what's and he's like, it's not. I was like, you're amazing,
oh,
like
you're
it's
good.
amazing,
Yeah,
and I was like, I promise you, it's much better than my Spanish, so you're great. And he was just one of the sweetest men, and really gave it his all, was so committed. And just, it was amazing to listen to him talk.
yeah,
For, blanking on my other, because he was in Amores Perros, and he was the other detective,
yeah.
and he, wonderful. We got to go to his house. He made us a giant, like, paella as a going away thing, and we all stirred it up, and it was delicious. But really had an amazing time
Yeah.
there.
I mean, a part of the reason that made the movie, one of many factors that made the movie so good is how your guys' relationship in the movie evolved. In the beginning, he thought, "Oh, you're a gringo, get out of my
Yeah.
country." And then you see this mutual respect start to build and, to the ultimate ending, which we're not going to spoil for people who want to go see it. It's a great movie. Some people are
Okay.
probably hearing about it for the first time right now. Uh, I believe I saw it. Is it available on Shutter?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Okay.
because that's where like I forget where I saw it initially. Emilio had sent it to me, so that's where I saw it initially. But yeah, it's on Shutter right now. So which is really cool because
Yeah.
I'm a huge Shutter fan. That's normally my all right. I've had a
Go
long
to the
day.
horror. Yeah, yeah.
So
So if you guys want to see, it's Belzebeth, and it's
yeah,
available on Shutter. We only have a minute or two left.
yeah.
What do you have coming up that we should know about?
Well, just finished shooting. That was the other thing I just shot up in Angel's Crest in Los Angeles. A movie called Jess Plus None. It'll be still in editing right now. It'll probably be a while before it's out. I'm sure it'll probably do the festival circuit. One to look out for though. It's a comedy though, and I had an absolutely amazing time on it. The cast is wonderful. You can go look it up on IMDb.
Hmm.
But it was one of those times again of like we're all here. We were all essentially a summer camp. It's supposed to take place over a weekend wedding, and just a bunch of actors and directors and writers and everybody just making a film, and that's some of the best times.
Yeah.
Like everybody's there just to make a movie, and so there's no worrying about too much with the budget, and you're having fun. So whenever you see that, give it a watch. And then I'm about to go shoot another thing called a Chorus that just got, which will be kind of intense. It's more of a drama. And then like, just episodes. You'll also see me probably coming up in a few commercials recently because I just had to shoot a few. So there'll be a
That's
few
awesome. That's
it's
awesome.
like, all right, like
It sounds
so.
like you're doing great, and you're they're keeping you busy. That's awesome. I've been staring at that artwork in the back. I think
Oh,
it's beautiful. You did all that?
yeah, all this is mine. So yeah, like this
Oh
is all my
man.
stuff.
Oh man,
I
that is awesome. Tate, thank
thanks.
you so much for coming on. This hour just flew by. Uh
I ramble. So
quickly. No, no, it was awesome getting to hear your stories and to hear how you got into acting and the Quanticos, Sinister 2, the Endless, and Belzebeth. Thank you so much for letting me know how to pronounce it.
It took me a while. I kept wanting to say something different. They were like, "No, Beelzebub." I was like, "Okay."
So thank you again for joining us, guys. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as we did. Any final thoughts you want to share before we go?
Just keep listening to Dead Talk Live, and then keep watching horror films.
Absolutely. Let's keep horror going, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Till Monday, stay safe. And on behalf of Tate and myself, stay walking. Good night.
Absolutely.